In this episode of the Dairyland Initiative podcast, we're going to be talking about the brisket locator and neck rail. Hi, I'm Courtney Hallbach.
And I'm Nigel Cook,
And this is the Dairyland Initiative podcast,
where we get to discuss issues related to the housing and management of dairy cattle.
Let's dive in. So, briskets and neck rails, I don't think we're talking about barbecue today.
Stalls Part 8. No, I don't know where we are.
Oh, there's a second part.
It's really the third, because we did surface before, yeah?
Yeah. Okay, so surface from way back when
Yeah.
to
Lunch and Bob.
Lunch and Bob.
That was the last one.
Lunch with Bob. I probably have said that too much.
Yes.
But now I'm thinking about brisket and barbecue.
Uh-huh. There's a lunch theme here.
And we're getting close to lunchtime as we're recording this. So.
If you don't know what a brisket is...
Yeah, what is a brisket? Where did that word come from? Because it's really hard to translate.
It's the front bit. Yeah,
Oh.
it's that bit there. That is the cow's brisket, which does go well for lunch. I'm feeling hungry myself. But let's get into it, Courtney.
Okay.
This gets back to our assessment of stalls, trying to think about how the cow uses them by stepping into lying down, rising and leaving. So we're back to that kind of process. And what I thought we would do in this episode is focus on how that lying space is delineated.
Yeah,
Yep.
defined.
Defined.
Delineated is a very...
Sounds a bit too
It's too sophisticated.
high tech.
Yeah.
So how do we position the
I
cow?
like that better. Position.
Or indexing. Yeah, index
Are
the
you
cow.
a thesaurus?
So how do you position the cow in the stall? Well, we've got our dimensions. We've got our recommendations, and some thought those were a bit insane when they came out,
Because they were too much space.
giving the cows all this extra space. But how that is defined laterally, we've got the divider loops. And we're going to leave that one for another episode. But the front of the resting area is defined by the brisket locator. And the purpose of that brisket locator is when the cow is lying down, it places the cow relative to the rear curb. So she doesn't lie too forward or too far backwards.
Yep, just right, so that she is defecating into the manure alley.
Exactly. And then the other thing that positions the cow, not when she's lying down, but when she's standing, is the neck rail. So we've got the neck rail attached to the upper part of the divider loop, and that positions the cow where she's standing. Okay. And obviously getting her in a right standing position impacts her lying position. Yep. So if she has to stand diagonally across the stall because it's the only way she fits, she's probably going to end up lying diagonally as a result of that.
Yeah.
So that's the plan. This is the issue. If you get these things wrong,
You're going to see diagonal lying.
the cow lies diagonally in the stall. We've got manure. The manure is always under the loop.
Yeah, so if you're walking in a pen and you notice manure piling under the loops, then
You've got diagonal line issues. Yeah, yeah. And again, most of these issues were related not to making the stalls too big, but to having obstructions in front of the stall. And we talked in the last episode about the mounting bars and obstructions in front. But one of those obstructions, part of the junk in front, is the brisket locator. So that's what we're going to focus on right now. So this was the original brisket locator.
Just a big board in front of the
brisket board. This ugly thing here. Do you know what that was, Courtney?
Some
How it started its life?
as a tree.
After that. That is the form that the builder uses to pour the curb. So they used to basically take that form off and then bang a couple of nails in it, and that became the brisket locator.
That's sustainability. You're reusing.
Reuse, recycle.
There we go.
Yeah, absolutely. The problem is the curbs are usually 8 or 10 inches high, and using an 8 to 10 inch high piece of wood...
Looks like a big obstruction.
How in the world is your cow going to be able to make that front stride with her leg as she's getting up and down?
No idea.
So what you hear in this barn, Courtney, is this front leg slamming into this piece of wood all the time.
Bam.
Bam. Not good.
No.
Okay. Compromised. And we're going to play our video of our cow getting up. That nice front leg stride. Makes it easy for the cow to get up and down. They really want to do this. They really want to make that stride. They can still get up.
But I'm guessing it's just not
they can slam their front leg down and do what I call the clean and jerk. It's like watching a weightlifter just pushing straight out. Young fit cow can do that. Tough for an older cow to do that. They want to stride forward. So whatever you use as a brisket locator, the cow has to be able to get her leg over the top of it.
Makes sense.
So this is another version. This is still a piece of wood in a sand-bedded stall, but here you can see the cow getting up, and she's got her leg over the top.
And that positions her leg nicely for her to push back out of the stall.
Exactly. And the issue with this one is that piece of wood is connected to the lower divider rail, and actually the lower divider rail is too low.
Yeah.
So this whole stall works as a unit. You've got to factor in all these different things, but we're focused here on the height of the brisket locator and getting the cow's leg over the top. So the story of the poly pillow.
Yeah, that's something available on the market.
Pretty common, piece of plastic that we use typically in mattress stalls. And there were a couple of installers. One of them would go around the state installing the poly pillow directly on the stall platform, and then they would bed the mattress in, so the mattress cover would attach underneath. And so the mattress was higher than the bottom of the poly pillow. And so this one is installed correctly because you can measure the height here. It's 4 inches, 10 centimeters.
And that's exactly what you want.
When you watched the cows in these stalls, they got their legs over the top of this.
No problem.
Yep, so they would get up and they would be able to get their front leg forward. We also had construction professionals putting a piece of wood underneath it. So you can see that here. And that builds the whole thing up. That piece of wood was used to trap the cover of the mattress.
Okay.
But now the poly pillow is at its full height, and it was built 5 3/4 inches high. And a lot of cows couldn't get their legs over the top of that.
So even just that couple inches there is
same
enough.
Product, just installed slightly differently. One with a wooden plinth underneath, making it the full height. The other one hiding part of its height. Big difference. And what you saw with these stalls, more diagonal lying. Because again, the cows lie diagonally, and they try to give themselves a little bit more space for their front legs. Get it?
Got it.
If you give them 20 years, they'll remodel. Okay?
Of course they will.
So about 15 years of slamming that toe into that poly pillow, you can kind of see the gaps and the wreckage caused by cows breaking the plastic. So it's an impact. That toe wants to go there, and it's been driven into that plastic. This one's got some German engineering behind it.
Yeah, well, I can see that they listened to the cows. They saw what the cows were doing and decided to put
If she gets it right, I think that's 4 inches. But then this kind of brisket has a wavy pattern to it, and so the upper edge is too high. It goes...
What's the point?
Not recommended. You can see the cow slamming her toe into this one. There's limited published research here. I was just about
to ask, is a brisket locator needed?
That was a question that our good friend Cass Tucker asked. So she did a study that compared a stall with an 8-inch high wooden brisket locator with stalls without. And the cows liked the stalls without the brisket locator.
But I feel like there's a big but.
And I cannot lie. There is a big but here, and that is that if you build a big stall, a 10-foot long stall that we're asking people to do, if you don't have something to locate the cow as a brisket locator, it becomes a bit of a mess.
Yeah, she's going to be too far forward in the stall.
Yeah, so some farmers using deep bedding would just pile the bedding up. But if you pile the bedding up, you create a bob zone obstruction. You shrink the height of the neck rail, and you change the height of the lower divider rail. So I'm not a huge fan of that approach. But I'll also admit that if you're on an older stall that was only built 8 feet long, and it's got an 8-inch high brisket locator, just get rid of it.
Yeah,
it's not doing anything. The cow's not going to lie anywhere because she doesn't have the front space.
Yeah.
But we do need to provide the cow, I think, something to locate her in these bigger stalls.
Yep, in these 10-foot, 3-meter long stall platforms, we need a brisket locator.
Yep. And the magic number is something that's no higher than 4 inches.
Or 10 centimeters.
You got it, for our metric friends. So that is something that places the cow, but allows her to get her leg over the top of it. Mm-hmm. So what have we got as options? Well, there's a number of things to do. You can avoid it, not put the brisket locator in. This is a farm that did that.
With deep bedding.
Deep bedding, cows lying too far forward.
In nice big stalls.
Nice big stalls, but manure everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
This is a mastitis outbreak waiting to happen. So that's why we don't do that. But again, some people will pursue that. I don't recommend it. Others, we're still using poly pillows, but again, mostly for mattress stalls. So then we're left with pieces of wood or pieces of round plastic or fiberglass.
Mm-hmm. Some good old solid pipes.
Yeah, and those pipes are usually located off the lower divider rails. Mm. And the problem with the initial versions of those were that they weren't adjustable. So eventually we'll talk about the height of that lower rail, and we were asking it to be a little higher than the installers were putting them at, which means that if you have a fixed bracket, then the brisket locator ends up being too high.
Yeah.
So it took a while, but now we do have poly pipes with adjustable brackets off the lower rail. So you can put the lower rail at the height that you want it at, and you can kind of see that there's an adjustment to put the brisket locator where it needs to be. The issue with that whole assembly is it looks great when you first install it.
Yeah, but over time and
it
bedding.
Rusts. Wet bedding will make it rust, and there's a lot of pressure on it. You've just got a couple of bolts holding these things in place. They move, they break. So there's maintenance involved in doing this. But this is an option. Okay. We revisited concrete. In the early days, we were getting rid of a lot of concrete. These platforms were typically built in these head-to-head stalls too high. They just filled, you saw that big old brisket locator, that piece of wood, the original boards. A lot of builders would just fill that with concrete, the other side
behind
of it.
Yeah.
Huh. And that ended up being a sort of 8-inch high lump of concrete in the front of the stall to anchor the roof supports or whatever they were doing. Not great for cows. Kind of got in the way of where the front leg wanted to be, got in the way of lunge. See Lunge and Bob in our last episode. So we got rid of a lot of concrete.
And then here you come.
Here we come. We're kind of revisiting that decision. Could we use concrete in a different way? And this is where this brisket slope thing came from.
Okay.
And this was the very first version at a farm. Dave Lundgren was the farmer up near Salk. We drove past his farm the other day. And he had a problem. He had sand barn, but his wooden posts holding his divider rails were rotting out. So they were all collapsed. And he said, Nigel, I want to put the posts and I want to reconcrete them, but I can't put them where they were before.
Okay.
So he had to reconcrete them further in towards the curb.
Okay.
And I said, well, if you're going to do that, then why not make that area the brisket? So he came up with this kind of sloped pattern and redid the stalls. And it wasn't too bad. It seemed to work pretty nicely. So that was the very first brisket slope. And it was basically because we needed a way of concreting the wooden posts back in. So then we went to a couple other farms that were actually removing that big pile of concrete in front of the stalls. That was Kellercrest Farm, so shout out to Tim and Mark. I'll show you some pictures from there later. And we were building a new facility, Sunburst Dairy. So we've mentioned Brian and Yogi Brown before. Shout out to them. But they became the second version of the brisket slope. So this is the official
so
version.
what changed? What did you do differently?
We didn't have to place the thing kind of where we had to for the posts, although you can see vertical posts concreted in on this one. That shows its age, I think. But we could really think about placing the cow, but also sloping that area so that the cow could place her foot on it. And that's a key element. We want the cow to be able to put her foot on this slope, and that will allow her to take that step backwards that we need her to do in a freestall. Remember, a cow on pasture will end up standing in front of where she's lying down. In a freestall, we're asking that cow to take a step backwards, and that brisket slope will help her do that.
Yeah, why not give her a better opportunity to push back?
So we put these dimensions together that are on our website. The top edge of the slope is only 3.5 inches above the point of the rear curb, and this whole area is sloped over about 10 inches, 25 centimeters, which means it has to be hand done.
I was going to say that it sounds like it requires a lot of work.
There's a bit of work putting these things in, so you have to hand paddle this into place, and I'll show you how it's done in a moment. So this took a few builders, kind of a little bit of trial and error to work out how to do this. So this has become the UW brisket slope. This was the first drawing. So I basically drew it out for the builder, exactly what we needed to do.
Some ancient caves.
Yeah, so a little cave drawing, put it, where the top edge of the concrete was going to end up, put where it was going to be relative to the rear curb, 72 inches in this particular situation. Put where the lower rail of the divider loop was going to be so they could kind of see all of that, and I did sign it.
I hope it's still there in this farm.
So this was the one at Keller's, and this is the form. Wow. Actually, if you've seen the piece of wood downstairs in the staging area, that is the form.
Oh, my. Chris, if you're listening, it might be time to let go of the form.
Chris collects things, and so he made sure that we kept that one. So we basically built the form, and you can see the builders here hand paddling that slope into place after the concrete has been formed into that area in front of the stall. So this was at Keller's, and you can see where the original concrete height was. Way above.
Way above. That's significantly
and so
above.
This slope is much lower than that. And this enabled the cows to be positioned.
Well, what did farmers say? Going from that big block of concrete in the front to something much lower.
They said it works.
Oh,
yeah.
Happiness all around.
Happy cows, because they're able to lie with their legs outstretched. Cows like to do that. They're able to plant their foot on the slope as they're getting up and down. So it does those two things.
And look at her, just nicely positioned.
And it positions the cow. Mm-hmm. The only disadvantage we've had is if the texture is a little too rough and you don't want to bury this thing in sand, because then the cow can't feel it, but you need some bedding over the top to stop knee abrasion.
Yeah.
So you'll see a little bit of hair loss on the knees if that slope starts too close to the rear curb or it's a little too abrasive. Mm-hmm. Those are the disadvantages we've seen. But as you watch this cow, she plants that front leg forward, takes a step back out of the stall, and it works. And then you've got the cows lined up, lying down straight in the stall with their bums on the platform. So they're not hanging over the edge. The tails are curled round on the platform. Mm-hmm. This is an older picture with some dock tails, so we don't do that anymore. But if you keep the tails on the cows, they don't hang in the alleyways. They're curled round on the platform. So it works, and it's really for deep bedded stalls. It's hard to do this on a mattress stall, but the brisket slope has become, I think, the go-to for a deep bedded stall.
You've convinced me to do it.
Oh, you're so easy. Well, the other thing we've got to think about is not only positioning the cow when she's lying down, but positioning the cow when she's standing in the stall.
And you can do that with the neck rail.
This is where the old neck rail comes into play. So this is just a straight bar attached to the top of the loop.
Yeah, and so when you're thinking about the neck rail, you're thinking about its position from the rear curb as well as off of the stall surface.
Yeah, so the height below the neck rail so that the cow can rise without smacking her back into it, and then the space behind the neck rail. So those are the dimensions we use because we're thinking of this being used by a cow. Mm-hmm. Those are the two dimensions that the cow experiences. And we drive the builders a bit nuts because we give them those two numbers and they want the diagonal.
Yes, and there are some resources available online that show the diagonal.
Right. So there's Pythagoras can help with that, I think.
That's way beyond my degree.
Okay, one of those. A squared equals B squared plus C squared or something like that.
Something like that. We'll double check.
The diagonal is required by the builder because when they're building a stall, particularly a deep-bedded stall, the only thing they have fixed is the rear point of the curb. The deep bed is basically a hole in the ground. So they've got nothing to sort of measure off. So we'll often calculate that diagonal for them so that they can mount the loop at the correct height and then put the diagonal and locate the neck rail. But I have to say it's often put in the wrong place.
Yes, lots of farms
times.
with poorly positioned neck rails.
So this is a mattress stall, Courtney. We're looking down on the cow from above. And what do you think of the location of that neck rail relative to the curb?
I think it's a little bit too far back towards the curb, and that's making the cow stand diagonally as she's trying to fit into the stall.
Yeah, if you've got some deficits in geometry, cows don't. Mm-hmm. They're pretty smart. They can work out that they can fit along the diagonal. Cows are smart, see?
Yeah, as smart as me.
So she can get up on the platform, but only diagonally across the stall. Mm-hmm. You don't want that in a mattress stall. You want to put the neck rail forward so that the cow can stand square. Mm-hmm. Yep, you want her to stand straight in the stall. So that, on this one, you can actually see where the brisket locator is. And you need to move it forward.
Yeah, it needs to be, in a mattress stall, you want the neck rail to be directly above the brisket locator.
Yeah. We're going to revisit that when we talk about a deep-bedded stall, particularly with sand, because the recommendation is going to change. Mm-hmm. But with mattresses, we want to avoid the cow standing diagonally or standing with the rear feet in the alleyway, perching half in and half out of the stall. You want the cow to stand square up on the platform. Mattress recommendation. You also want to put the neck rail in a place where the cow doesn't hit it.
Oh, ouch.
So this is a video of a cow where we've got the double whammy. We've got the bob zone violation. Mm-hmm. We've got a lower mounting bar in front, so she hits her chin, and then the neck rail's too low because you've got these narrow loops that have been mounted too low, and she's banging herself into that rail as well.
How does she not have a concussion?
It's not good. It's not good. And you will visit farms that have these weird little divots in cow spines.
Ugh.
Yeah, and most of those are neck rail related. Sometimes it's the feed rail and the feed bunk, but mostly it's the neck rail in the stall. So you can see this cow's broken her spinous processes on her vertebrae because of poorly located neck rails. So you've got to provide sufficient height below that neck rail to stop injury.
Yeah.
Okay. You can allow the cow to touch the bar, and you'll often see the underside of these rails rubbed shiny. Touching's okay. I just don't want cows slamming into that thing and causing injury. So because of how stalls were built and because neck rails were frequently too low and in the wrong place, farmers said, okay, we're going to fix this. Mm-hmm. It's injuring our cows. And so they invested a lot of time, energy, and money into things like this, little brackets, to elevate the neck rail. And it probably helped stop a few injuries.
Okay.
Problem with it is that if you didn't fix all the other things that were wrong about the stall, it didn't make that much difference to lying time and lameness and all those other things. Remember, the components of the stall all function together.
They all interact.
They interact.
Change one, you got to change another.
So this is a short platform with a mattress, with a high brisket locator. Guess how the cows are getting up in this stall? They're going to diagonal lunge. They lunge to the side. When you lunge to the side, the lower rail of the loop is the neck rail.
Yeah, it's not the actual
it's not the actual neck rail. So a lot of time and energy wasted, and it's not fixing the problem.
Yeah.
Why they're doing this, though, is the concern about higher neck rails and the cows going underneath the loops. And so refer back to the previous episode where we talk about the location of that deterrent wire or bar.
To keep cows from going too far
to
forward.
Stop that. Exactly. If you do that in the right place, you can put the neck rail in the right place. This is a cow that's working on her geometry. So she's worked out here on a sand-bedded stall that she can wedge herself in diagonally between the neck rail and the rear curb. And notice what's happened.
I can see a pile of manure there.
Pile of poop.
Yep.
Yeah. So this one, there's lots of things wrong, actually, because you don't really have sufficient height either. Yeah. You can see how low this thing is. And it's too close to the rear curb because the cow can get on the platform. But you've got to give the cow the ability to get up. Yeah?
Yeah.
So if I recommend moving the neck rail back to keep the stalls clean, this neck rail is so low that that cow is going to be clattering into that rail every time she gets up. So height and distance behind the rail are important things to consider. What's going on this farm, Courtney? This is a UK dairy that I visited.
This doesn't look like an American dairy.
Big open UK barn. Sand bedding, one of the fewer kind of first sand-bedded barns.
I see some cows that are able to fully stand in the stalls.
We have got cows standing up on the platform in the stall. That's what we're taught to do for mats and mattresses. That's what the builders are used to doing. So when builders build a sand barn that they're not used to doing, they put the neck rails where they put them in the mattress barns. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't work.
Because cows are standing in the stall and
all the urine and fecal matters landing in the bedding, creating a big soup of bacteria. You can't do it. So lesson learned. And we've learned that lesson over here too with some of the barns we put together. Walked in the barn with our generous dimensions and thought, geez, I need to quit. The cows are filthy. And then we get the tape measure out and realize that the neck rail's too far forward. That neck rail position can make or break it. You know, it functions together. The neck rail has to be in the right position.
So with deep bedded stalls, we're going to move that neck rail 6 inches?
We've got to have the height that we need. So fix the height first. Mm-hmm. Then we move the neck rail back. Okay. And the idea is that it starts off where you would put the neck rail in a mattress stall, vertically above a correctly located brisket locator, which is typically 68 to 72 inches from the rear curb, depending on the size of the animal. Biggest animals maybe even 75. We move that neck rail closer to the rear curb in a deep bedded stall because cows don't stand on the curb.
Nope.
They will not put their feet on top of the curb. Even when you make it flat, this one's sloped, can be rounded. What they tend to do is stand inside the curb or in the alleyway. You want them here, you don't want them here.
So it's okay to see some perching in a deep bedded...
Sacrilege, yes, but that is true. We want the cows in a deep bedded stall to perch. This is what we call perching, standing with the rear feet in the alleyway. And to do that, that neck rail comes back about the width of the rear curb. So typically in that sort of 6 to 8 inch range.
15 centimeters.
15 centimeters. So it's closer to the rear curb than you would have it in a mat or mattress stall because you have to back the cow out of the stall.
But she can still get in, right?
She can still get in because we have the height and she's still not going to hit it. Yeah, so you've still got probably a deterrent wire located with the top of the cow's head, so that's not an obstruction, so she's not going to go underneath. But we've got sufficient height below that neck rail, and that gets back to how open this divider loop is. The internal diameter of the loop is important to place that neck rail at the correct positioning.
Okay.
But perching is good in a sand barn.
It's acceptable.
There's research out there, Courtney, that says perching creates lameness, but I think it is associative and it's really linked with poor stall design and mostly mattress barns.
Okay.
The barn I'm showing you here has 5% lameness.
Huh.
All of the stall standing.
I see some cows perching.
It's all perching. They all perch in this barn, and they do so with a cell count of about 60,000. Because the bedding is clean, it doesn't have fecal matter and urine mixed in with it. Mm-hmm. So design allows you to make this all work.
Great.
Bendy neck rails are I don't like
worst
them.
nemesis.
They're a nemesis. And that is a function of me wanting deep bedded stalls and the neck rail to place the cow relative to the curb. If you use a bendy neck rail, a neck rail that's designed to, I think, stand the cow straight in the stall, so it's higher.
And I'm guessing there's
area.
Something to reduce injury as well.
Probably with a focus on injury.
Not the shiny metal that we've
built
mentioned.
Largely in Europe for mattress stalls. So again, probably works fine in a mattress stall. But in a sand stall, it just doesn't place the cow relative to the rear curb because it's not a uniform distance from the rear curb across the width of the stall. So not a big fan of this type of neck rail for deep bedded stalls.
So no bends.
A straight bar, no bends. A straight horizontal rail, no bends. My final piece of advice, Courtney,
Nuts up.
Nuts up. Anybody who knows me, I've got a lot of sayings, but one of them is keep your nuts up. What do I mean by that? We usually put the neck rail in the wrong place when we build these barns. It requires adjustment often. Mm-hmm. If you put the nut on top of the bolt, as you see here, you can go along the neck rail fairly quickly, just loosen those nuts and adjust the neck rail. If you put the nut on the bottom, you'll spend
swearing.
You'll spend all day swearing and looking for nuts in the bedding. So don't do it. Always put your nuts up. So that's my advice for you today, Courtney. And
thank you, Dr. Cook.
A way of finishing this episode.
A way of finishing. Besides knowing what nuts up is, I hope you took away the importance of the brisket locator in these appropriately sized stalls of longer platforms, and the importance of using a neck rail to also position the cow when she is standing in the stall.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. The Dairyland Initiative is supported by industry leaders who are advancing cow comfort worldwide. We would like to say a special thank you to our premier sponsor, Saputo, who is providing the global community with high-quality dairy products made from high-quality milk from healthy and well-cared-for animals. We'd also like to say thank you to our other sponsors, SaveCows.com, Zinpro, GPS Dairy Consulting, 40 Barn, Sure Gain Trow Nutrition, Munters, J&D Manufacturing, VES Artex, Ventec, and Kestrel Instruments. Thanks for tuning in to the Dairyland Initiative podcast. Want more Dairyland Initiative? Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, follow us on our socials, and visit our website for all of the latest recommendations in dairy cattle housing and management. See you next time.